Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
He actually waited 4 days before he called. 2 days longer than I thought. I listened as his smarmy voice oozed through the phone. Tom, please be reasonable. I'm sure we can work out an agreement we're all happy with. Why don't you come by the office? We'll sit and discuss it like reasonable men. That's a great idea, Stan. I already know what I want. He hated being called Stan, insisting on Stanley. I heard his hiss, but he controlled it. That's just great, Tom. I do admire a reasonable man. What do you want? We'll have it ready when you come over. I want that bitch of a daughter of yours to honor the prenup as written. Nothing else is acceptable. Understand me, Stan? And as for coming over, it'll be a cold day in hell before I walk back into that snake den you call a home. His control and good humor disappeared. You low-class prick. I told her you were a gold digger, but would she listen? No. Now I'm gonna have to clean up her mess, just like I did when she was in college. You'll regret this, you miserable redneck. He was practically screaming by the end. Stan, are you threatening me? I'm hurt, Stan. I always thought a lot of you. I was laying it on thick. We hated each other from the moment we met. He couldn't make coherent words for about a minute. Then he exploded. I'm gonna make one more try to be reasonable. 1 million, after taxes, and you can divorce her right after the election. I let a few seconds go by before I answered. $1 million? Gee, let me think about that, hell no. Not happening, Stanley old boy. You have a nice day now. Gotta run. Feel free to call anytime. He was still screaming when I hung up. The man was delusional. His career was gone. His loving family probably destroyed and about to be vilified by everyone with an opinion. The genie was out of the bottle, and he was still trying to make deals to fix it. I immediately sent 3 copies of what I had recorded off to safe places. I couldn't be too careful. He was pissing in the wind anyway. The wheels of justice were already turning, and nothing he could do now would stop them. I met her when I had to lay cable by her house. I was a subcontractor, owning my own equipment. Everyone was going to fiber optic and buried cables. They were faster, cheaper, and best of all, being buried, they weren't susceptible to weather. Barring earthquakes, catastrophic floods, or a homeowner who wasn't paying attention, they were practically indestructible. The company I had contracted with had gotten permission from the state to use their right-of-way, for a fee of course. I was in front of a house that was the biggest in the neighborhood, in a neighborhood of multi-million-dollar homes. Fenced, tall gates, paved circular drive. Expensive cars sat around haphazardly. Obviously there was a party going on. I could hear the music booming through my headphones, over the sound of my ditch witch, a machine that digs the trench, lays the cable, and covers it in one smooth motion. It was an April afternoon, hot for the time of year. I had my shirt off to catch some sun, trying to get a good tan before it really got hot. I didn't go to a gym or tanning beds, but doing what I did for 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, kept me in terrific shape. I stopped to reload my cable spool and looked over at the house. There was a spectacular-looking brunette, standing on the balcony in the smallest bikini I had ever seen. If it hadn't been black, I would have sworn she was naked. Standing may have been a generous word. She was swaying back and forth and suddenly tumbled over the rail. I didn't believe my eyes for a moment, then I went running across the yard. I found her in the bushes under the balcony. She was scratched pretty bad. She was also knee-walking drunk. Literally. I couldn't get her to her feet. When I finally picked her up, she screamed when she put her weight on her feet. I sat her back down as gently as I could. I checked her over, and her left ankle was swollen to twice as big as normal, and she moaned when I touched it. I made her as comfortable as I could and went to the front door. I rang the bell and pounded, but no one answered. I couldn't go around the house because of the fence. I went back to her. Maybe she could call someone inside the house and get them to come out. She was still so smashed she couldn't talk, and her ankle was turning purple. Shit, I said to myself as I scooped her up. I put her in my truck and took a second to write down the address. 15 minutes later, I was carrying her through the emergency room doors. I put her down gently and went to the desk. They had watched me walk in. What's wrong with her? The nurse at the desk asked, already shoving a clipboard at me. She fell off a balcony. I think she broke an ankle, and I'm pretty sure she's drunk. Another nurse went off to check her while the others shoved the clipboard at me. Her name here. Your name there. Type of insurance. Relationship to each other. Medical history. It's pretty self-explanatory. I shoved it back. I don't know her name, and I'm not giving you mine. I saw her fall off the balcony at a house I was working in front of. There was no one home. She was in obvious distress, so I brought her here. I can give you the address. She'll tell you who she is and who to call when she sobers up. I'm sure. I lied about the party, and I don't know why. Probably to make the story sound better and get her taken care of more quickly. The desk nurse frowned and tried to talk me into signing. Not gonna happen, lady. I don't mind helping her, but I won't be responsible for her. Judging by her house, her family has a few coins. You shouldn't have a problem getting paid. Now, you gonna treat her, or what? She grumbled, but really didn't have a choice. I sat with her until they took her back, then split. Last thing I wanted was to be a designated sitter to some little rich bitch. I got back to my equipment and looked up her driveway. All the cars were gone, and a small Mercedes was pulled to the front. It was too late to get any more work done, so I pulled my machine up onto my trailer. I wrestled with it for a bit, but decided someone needed to know. I walked up the driveway and knocked on the door. A really attractive woman who resembled the girl opened the door. I assumed it was an older sister. I found out quickly it was her mother, 42 at the time. She looked early 30s. Her eyes were cool. Can I help you? No, ma'am, but you can help someone else. I was working in front of your house earlier today and saw a woman fall off your balcony. I think she hurt her ankle pretty bad, and I took her to the ER at Methodist. I felt like someone needed to know. She was too hurt to think straight. Oh my God! She burst out, running to her car. She peeled out of the drive, leaving me standing there with the door to her house standing wide open. Rich folks are a strange bunch, I thought, as I pulled her door closed, making sure it was locked. I had lost half a day and was on a schedule, so I was there bright and early Saturday and worked 12 hours, finishing my portion of the job. I glanced at the house several times, debating whether to check on the girl, but there were no cars in the drive, so I left. 5 weeks went by, and I had pretty much forgotten about it when someone knocked on my door. There were 2 women standing there, one on crutches. I didn't make the connection. I ran my business out of my home, so I thought maybe they were potential customers. Can I help you ladies with something? The older one smiled and said in a light voice, yes, you can invite us in and let us thank you. I moved out of the door and motioned them in. Thank me for what? The younger one actually laughed. He doesn't remember us, Mom. I would think watching me fall would have made a bigger impact on you. Recognition came to me. Balcony girl. She smiled. In the flesh. And my name is Eve. This is my mom, Greta. We came by to thank you for helping me. I sat them down and got them both a soft drink. You're welcome. How's the ankle? Mending. I broke it in 2 places. My tennis days are over, I'm afraid. Good thing I was so drunk when I fell, or I would have gotten hurt a lot worse. Her mother drew in a sharp breath. Relax, mother. It's the truth, and you both know it. She turned back to me. I wanted to come by earlier, but between my ankle and the counseling I was taking, I didn't have an opportunity. I wanted to thank you for helping me and making me realize where my life was headed. Her mother looked uncomfortable. Eve, I really don't think you should burden Mr. Yount with details of your life. Maybe. She overrode her mother. No, Mom, I want to tell him. She looked back at me. You helping me gave me a wake-up call. There were over 30 people in my house when I fell, and not one came looking for me. Mom ran them all out when she got home. She didn't know I was hurt until you knocked on our door. When they treated me at the hospital, besides a broken ankle, I had a concussion, a blood alcohol level of 0.17, just under poisoning levels, and they found a mild STD. When I came to my senses in a hospital room, I had no idea how I got there, what was wrong with me, or how long I had been there. Mom came in a little later. She had been there for hours and was filling out forms when I woke. She stopped. Mom didn't want me to tell you these things, but it was important to me you should know. I wanted you to understand the woman I had become. I couldn't move for 10 days because I was in traction, and it gave me a lot of time to think. I went into some serious counseling, just short of a rehab program. I learned a lot about myself, things I didn't want to learn. I'm trying to change, be a better person, and it took the kindness of a stranger to set me on that path. That, sir, is what I wanted to thank you for. I looked at the women. They sat there like they expected me to say something. All I can say is you're welcome. Anyone would have done the same. And I'm glad you've decided to be a better person. We could all use a few more of those. Just out of curiosity, how did you find me? I didn't give anyone any information at the hospital, and your mom and I never exchanged names. For the first time, she giggled. I was wearing your shirt, remember? Something else I need to thank you for. That bikini didn't conceal a lot. Now did it? Not much at all, as a matter of fact. A thong bottom, and every time I moved her, one or both breasts popped free of the top. I had a clean shirt with my company logo and contact information in one of the storage boxes on my trailer. T-shirts are walking billboards, and I did get several jobs because of them. For that reason, I always carried 3 or 4 to give away. I got a 3X out and slid her into it. It went well down her thighs and preserved her modesty. I grinned. Yeah, I forgot about that. You're welcome. Her smile got even wider. It's become my favorite sleeping attire. She and her mother stood. Well, we won't keep you. Thanks again. She was almost at the door when she stopped. Oh yes, I almost forgot. My dad wants you to have dinner with us Saturday, 7 sharp. I'm sure you remember where the house is. They were both shocked when I declined. I'm sorry, ladies. I have a commitment Saturday evening I just can't break. But thank you for the offer. Both stood with their mouths open in shock. Finally, Greta spoke. Do you know who my husband is? No, ma'am. I don't even know your last name. Eve actually giggled. It's Wallace. My dad's name is Stanley Wallace, as in Stanley Wallace, Speaker of the State House. Sure you won't reconsider? As gracious as the invitation is, what I have to do is time-sensitive and can't be postponed. Perhaps another time, with a bit more advance notice. Greta stood in shock. Eve was laughing. Mom, can I tell Dad? He's not going to be happy. He doesn't take disappointment well. Eve took my hand. Thanks again for everything. Maybe we can have dinner another time. I find you fascinating. I'll give you plenty of advance notice, I promise. By now. Before I could react, she leaned in and kissed my cheek and hopped into the car. I watched them drive away, thinking how strange it all was. I still had her scent on my cheek. It smelled great. I was rattling around in the garage, loading what I needed for where I was going, when a convertible Mustang pulled in the drive. The door swung open, and I heard her. Can I get a little help? It was Eve. I helped her out and gave her the crutches. I apologize, I don't want to make you late for your date. I meant to be here sooner, but got delayed. I'd like to try again. Would you join my parents and I for lunch next Saturday? Please. What could it hurt? I accept your invitation. Tell me a time and I'll be there. And for clarification, I don't have a date tonight. I said I had to do something time-sensitive. She sat and watched me load up while we talked. This time-sensitive thing, can I come along? I looked at her, thinking, I don't think so. I don't think you'd enjoy it. Then I would be obligated to keep you entertained, and then I wouldn't enjoy it. Please. I knew I was making a mistake. All right. We'll most likely be out all night. Still want to come? There was a glint in her eye. You're not going to hurt me, are you? Then yes, I would love to accompany you. She made it sound like we were going to the opera. Call your mom. Tell her you won't be home until much later. She seemed surprised. I'm 22 years old. I don't need to call and get permission. I don't expect you do. I was thinking more on the line of being thoughtful, so she wouldn't worry. It looked like the concept was foreign to her, but she called. Mom, hi. I'm with Mr. Yount. I'll be with him most of the night. Didn't want you to worry. What? All right. She handed the phone to me. Thank you, Mr. Yount. I think this has been the first time she called me about her plans since she was 16. Where are you taking her? I'm not going to spoil the surprise. Suffice to say it's quiet, off the beaten path, and completely safe. Well, try to have a good time. My daughter can be distracting at times. I stopped at a Walmart on the way out of town. I need to pick a few things up. I won't be long. Back in 15 minutes, I tossed the bags in the back of the truck. It took almost an hour to get there. The city lights long behind us, it seemed to magnify the stars. I turned up a driveway and stopped in front of a typical farmhouse of the area. Whiteboard, black shutters. An older man, slender and spry for his age, came to the door. Hi, Uncle John, just checking in. Anybody else here yet? Are you coming up? Ron and Cassie and the young'uns Bob came. Junie couldn't make it. Fred, Celeste, their kids. Most of the gang is up there already. No, I'm staying in, getting too old for this. I couldn't help it. I had noticed her car, parked discreetly in back. Too old? Or maybe got a better offer. I raised my voice. How are you tonight, Marie? A voice came from inside the house. Fair to Midland, Tommy. Now why don't you go on up and stop teasing your uncle? We got unfinished business. Uncle John stood there blushing, and I told him to have a good night, and climbed back into the truck before he started asking about my own companion. We drove up the hill, stopping at the edge of a large meadow. 2 fires were burning. I could smell a grill going, and 8 kids were roaming around the tents that were set up. What are we doing here? Eve asked. We came here to see a show, but it doesn't start for a few hours. Come on, I'll introduce you. Everyone was curious about her. I had never brought a woman before, and you could see the speculation in their eyes. Celeste fussed at me, saying we almost missed dinner. Soon we had a plate of burgers, potato salad, and baked beans in front of us. I was surprised to see Eve clean her plate. They got into a conversation about fashion and beauty products, and I took this as a sign to leave them alone. Let the interrogation begin. I had warned everyone not to tell her what we were all doing here. I could tell it frustrated her no end. She was apparently used to getting what she wanted, when she wanted. After about 2 hours, Ron called out, "Almost time, folks. Get ready." I freaked Eve out, telling her to take off her clothes. "What?" Celeste laughed. I had given her the bags I had picked up at Walmart. "Come on, honey, let's get into my tent so you can change." It was the last week of May, and it was chilly up where we were. Eve was way underdressed in her thin tee and jeans. She had been staying close to the fire. I had bought her 2 sweatsuits and a pair of thick socks, guessing her to be a medium. While she was changing, I put the air mattress and sleeping bag on my platform. Over the years, we found it easier and much more comfortable to use the raised platforms. It really eased neck strain. Celeste brought her to me. "All ready now. I'm sure she appreciated your foresight." She was dressed a sweatsuit, hair back in a ponytail. I never saw baggy clothes look so good. "If you don't tell me what's going on, I'm going to explode. This isn't some sort of cult, is it?" I grinned. "That's right. We're all star worshippers. Now lie down. Nothing bad will happen. Just watch." She was still nervous and lay on the mattress as far away from me as she could. We lay there for about 15 minutes before she became impatient. "How long are we going to lie here?" "Most of the night." "Now hush, you said you wanted to come, so be still. The show should start any minute." Sure enough, 5 minutes later, a vivid meteor swept across the sky. "Did you see that?" she asked in a little girl voice. "Yes, it's the Aquarid meteor storm. If we're lucky, we'll see 3 or 4 dozen. That's why we were there. We were far enough away from the city to eliminate light pollution. We were an informal astronomy club, meeting when times were right to stargaze. Mostly family. It had gotten cooler. Time to slip into the bag. Don't worry, you're safe from me." She slipped in, with a little snicker. Snuggling against me, she whispered, "Yes, but who's going to keep you safe from me?" It was distracting having her lie there, rubbing that amazing body against me. I was about to give up when I felt a tug on the back. It was Amy, 6-year-old daughter of Fred and Celeste. "Uncle Tommy, can I get in with you? Bobby and Jimmy are acting up, and I can't sleep." I tousled her hair. "It's fine with me, baby, but I have a guest. If she says it's okay, climb in." She gave her best baby voice when she asked, "Please, Miss Eve? I don't wiggle much, and I won't make any noise." Eve's heart melted, of course, and pulled her between us. She snuggled down and was asleep almost instantly. Soon Eve went out. The sun rising woke me up. I looked over, and Eve and Amy were snuggled together, her little head nesting on Eve's shoulder. Celeste was standing there grinning, holding a camera. She put her hands to her lips. I slipped out of the bag quietly and followed her back to the picnic table. Some of the others were up fixing breakfast. She scrolled through the pictures she had taken, stopping at the one she liked best. "Here's what you're gonna look like as a family man." Cute, huh? We were all snuggled together. Eve was in my arms, and Amy was on top of us, her cheek resting just below Eve's chin. It was cute. I used the porta-john we kept there and took a quick shower in the makeshift bathhouse we had built. 4 55-gallon drums fiberglass together, heated by gas. You were allowed 20 gallons, fresh water being pumped from a nearby spring. When I was dressed, I went back to the tables. Eve was up, and Amy was sitting on her lap. Amy was the youngest of 4, the only girl, and had to fight for attention. I showed her the bathhouse and explained it to her, giving her a fresh sweatsuit. "Sorry, I didn't shop for undies," I said, grinning at her. "Not to be outdone," she grinned back. "That's all right. I kind of like going commando." Amy didn't understand any of what we said, and surprised us all by wanting to shower with Eve. She came out giggling. Her mom asked her what she was laughing about. She had to lean close for the answer. "Me and Miss Eve are going commando. We don't have panties on." She said it loud enough for a few to hear, and Eve glowed for a few minutes. She busied herself brushing Amy's hair. Breakfast was soon served, and we ate as a group, familiar with each other after years of shared experiences. Eve told them how we met, omitting the drunken party part, saying she slipped and fell off her balcony while I happened to be working there. By the time she was done, you would have thought I did the ankle surgery by myself. Amy was smitten with hero worship. She was about as subtle as a 6-year-old could be when she came out with what was on her mind. "You know, if you and Uncle Tommy got married, you'd be my aunt. How cool will that be?" Eve let her down gently. "It would be very cool, sweetie. I might just marry him to get to spend time with you. But he has to ask me first, and we're not that far along in our relationship. But he's already passed the sleeping together test." He doesn't snore and he doesn't hog the blankets, unlike someone else in the sleeping bag last night. Amy puffed up. Do not snore. Eve was right back at her. Do too. Do not. Yes, you do, baby. You snore like a fat puppy. It's the cutest sound in the world. That mollified her somewhat, especially when she told her she could call her Aunt Eve. Will you come back and watch the stars and sleep with us again, Aunt Eve? She looked at me. I'd love to, sweetie, but that's up to Uncle Tommy. If he says I can, I will. Amy came up to me and tugged my beard. Since she was 2 years old, if she wanted my attention and I was ignoring her, she would tug with her little hands until I gave her my attention. Say Aunt Eve can come back next time. Please, Uncle Tommy? I looked at Eve. She seemed anxious somehow. If she says yes when I ask her, I'd love it. Amy, Celeste, and Eve were smiling like it was a done deal. I made a mental note to reel my sister-in-law in. She seemed to take it as a personal affront that I remained unmarried. She took another shower when we got to my house. She came out dressed in the jeans and t-shirt she had on yesterday, hair and makeup perfect. She saw me frowning. What? Nothing. Not my business. She eyed me. You've got my interest piqued now. Say what's on your mind. I sighed. You're a really, really attractive woman. Why do you wear so much makeup and hide that beautiful face? Well, I said it. Now for the fallout. Surprisingly, she seemed to have tears in her eyes. Before I could move, I was the recipient of a very nice kiss. That's one of the sweetest things a man has ever said to me. Thank you. All I could fumble out was "You're welcome" as she hobbled out to her car. I helped her get situated. This cast comes off next week, then a month of physical therapy, and I'm supposed to be good as new. Thank you for last night. It was one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had. I'd love to go again, if you want me to. After all, we owe a 6-year-old a new aunt. Wouldn't want to disappoint, now would we? She took my phone and punched in her number, told me to call, and swept off. I thought about her all week, but didn't call. We lived in different worlds. I went on the internet and did a little research. Besides her dad being a big-time politician, they were rich. She had a trust fund for an undisclosed amount from her maternal grandfather, and the family wealth was estimated just below $50 million. Way out of my league. It was too bad. I really liked her. I got a pretty sharp call Thursday evening. Why haven't you called me? Never mind. I'm just reminding you of lunch Saturday. 1 sharp. My dad hates to wait. She hung up before I could reply. I thought about driving my work truck, but opted to drive my car instead. It was an MG Midget, a small British sports car based on the old Austin Healey designs. It wasn't worth a lot, but I liked it. It took me 4 years to totally restore it. For a small engine, rated just over 50 horsepower, it was surprisingly fast and very agile. I had never driven it in the rain. Eve was waiting for me at the door. Nice car? Yours? Oh, and you clean up very well. I had gone to my barber that morning. I called her a barber, but my sister-in-law Celeste is a very successful stylist. When she heard who I was going to dine with, she threatened to come over with her battery-operated head shears if I didn't come in for a trim. She fussed over me for 45 minutes before saying she had done the best she could with what she had to work with. Honey, you need to lose that beard. It makes you look 37, not 27. A very nice button-up shirt, casual slacks, new Doxiters. It was about as dressed up as I wanted to get. She met me at the door. I reached in my car for the bouquet of flowers. Ooh, you shouldn't have. She was reaching for the flowers when I told her they were for her mother. Her smile became cool again. I let it sit on her face for a second before I pulled out the other bouquet. This one is yours. She was all smiles again. Leaning in, she whispered in my ear. They're lovely, thank you. If you can be that thoughtful, maybe you can be trained on how to use a phone. It's simple really, if you can read. You go to contacts until you reach Eve and hit the button. It even dials for you. I find modern technology very useful, wouldn't you agree? Before I could frame a suitable response, we were through the door. Her mom and dad were waiting in the foyer. I think the gift of flowers was unexpected, and she seemed genuinely happy to get them. Well, there he was in the flesh. At 6'4", he towered over my 5'11". He was in pretty good shape, using his home gym and his membership at the Capitol religiously. We looked at each other, and the room got smaller. We were two alpha dogs, circling, looking for an opportunity to go for the throat. It surprised me. I usually didn't react this way. He was infamous for trying to intimidate people by sheer size and strength, and his bone-crushing handshakes were near legendary. I knew what was coming when he reached his hand out. You get a pretty good grip and a set of muscles manhandling equipment, and picking up 250-pound rolls of cable. He tried to squeeze and I squeezed back just a bit harder. It caught him totally by surprise. I saw his eyes widen a bit before they became narrow with anger. Eve and Greta were expecting me to react like everyone else did and rub my hand. But I simply let go and continued with the small talk. They looked at him, and he just shrugged. Later I learned he told them he had gone easy on me for Eve. The lunch was delicious, and I minded my manners. He didn't stay long, citing pressing state business. He did thank me for helping his daughter, and I think he actually meant it. It was like sunshine after a cloud when he left. I know he's a bit much when you first meet him, but he really is a good man. Greta said it like she was used to apologizing for him. Nonsense. I found him most interesting. They looked at me like I had just had a stroke and couldn't form coherent words. Then Greta smiled. Interesting. What an apt decision. They took me on a tour of the house. 7 bedrooms, large pool house, and a heated pool an Olympian would have been proud to train in. A groundskeeping crew, a maid and cook. So this is how rich folk lived. I thanked the cook for an excellent lunch when they showed me the kitchen. I don't think she got compliments often. Eve had made a slideshow out of the photos Celeste made. There was even 1 or 2 of the meteors. She stopped on the one of all of us snuggled together. Greta looked at her pointedly. Such a nice picture. I hope in the not-too-distant future I get an opportunity to enjoy some grandchildren. Eve laughed and kissed her cheek. Relax, Mom. I'm only 22. I have to find a man I like well enough to have children with first. Don't turn me into a broodmare just yet. We had a pleasant afternoon. Just as I was leaving, Greta sent her to get some of the dessert we enjoyed at lunch for later. As soon as she was out of earshot, Greta started talking. I want to thank you again for saving my baby, in more ways than one. The fact that a stranger took care of her while her good time friends continued to party wasn't lost on her. She told me she had the best time in her life when you took her to look at the meteors. Tommy, I want you to be careful around her. Not to be impolite, but you come from different worlds. I don't want either of you to get hurt. Before I could answer, Eve was back. She insisted I take her for a ride in my car. So we spent a pleasant couple of hours just drifting around. She had me stop in an empty parking lot just before we returned. Why are we stopping here? I asked. So I can do this, she replied, shoving her tongue down my throat. My high-mindedness and good intentions went right out the window. We kissed for about 10 minutes before she pulled back. Han, we have to stop or get naked, and I don't think my dad would want to see his daughter arrested in a school parking lot for being naked and performing lewd acts. Time to go home. I think they should install eyelids on phones so we can sometimes outstare them. I lasted until Tuesday before I called. She picked it up on the first ring. I was giving you one more day. You just beat the deadline. Want to do something tonight? Sorry, Eve. I have to work tomorrow. Just wanted to hear your voice and say hi. Are you at home? Not going back out? Yes and no. I'm in for the night. She hung up on me. Well, so much for pleasant conversation. I redialed, but it went a message. 25 minutes later, her car pulled into the drive. I helped her out and carried the ice cream she had brought in. I helped her to the couch. For someone about to be all better, she sure was helpless. What are you doing? She smiled that killer smile. You're not going out, ergo I have to come to you. Now give me the remote and scoop the ice cream. And since I had to come out here, I get to pick the movie. She pulled up a chick flick on Netflix, Under the Tuscan Sun, which I actually enjoyed. I had to get her a drink and another bowl of ice cream, then I had to help her to the bathroom. I hated pausing movies. Since I lived alone, I had gotten out of the habit, but the company was well worth the interruptions. She was misty-eyed by the end, snuggled to my shoulder, her hand gripped firmly in mine. We sat and talked afterwards. She had just graduated college with a degree in art. I shocked her by showing her my prints of Starry Night and sunflowers. What can I say? I liked Van Gogh. A Van Gogh fan, I would never have guessed. Anybody else catch your eye? Well, I really like Monet and Manet, but not as much. I'm not too keen on Dali and Picasso, or surrealists. And I like a lot of American artists. The Wyeths, all of them, Whistler, Georgia O'Keeffe, and Rockwell when I want something feel-good. Oh, I also like Rodin and Remington sculptures. She sat there with her mouth hanging open. Wow. We discussed art, among other things, until midnight. As she left, she asked if I had a good suit. Good, we're at Friday. We're going somewhere special. I think she felt me tighten up. Sorry, that came out all wrong. If you're not busy, the art museum in the capital is having a small event. I don't know if you heard, but there's a traveling exhibit of Monet works touring the country. The grand opening is Saturday. It's a preview for sponsors and invited guests. Our family is always represented, and this year it's my turn. It would be nice to go with someone who actually understood what I was talking about. Please come with me. I was a sucker for saying yes, and she knew it. Next time we date, you pick? If you can top our last one, I will be suitably amazed. Before I could respond, she gave me one more kiss and was gone. I called Celeste, and she called Eve, so I was able to get a nice, presentable suit for Friday night. She insisted we take my car. It was my first instance of valet parking, and I'm sure it showed. Don't worry, they won't get a scratch on it when they joyride, she said, then laughed at my reaction. Your car will be well taken care of. These people are professionals. Now, let's mingle. I recognized a lot of the people, shakers and movers in our state, and was surprised most of them were pleasant companions. She introduced me to a woman in her late 50s, and we got into a discussion over whether Van Gogh really committed suicide, or if he was in fact shot accidentally by a group of teen boys who had been tormenting him at the time. A few minutes went by and I noticed Eve was gone. I felt guilty for ignoring her, and looking around the room, found her in deep conversation with two men our age. She caught my eye and I think she saw the flash of jealousy. She had a hard time controlling her smile when she rejoined my side. Who were you talking to? Her smile got a little wider. Nobody, darling, just an ex-boyfriend or two. Tell me, did you like Vivian? Trying to cover my jealousy, I answered. She's a very sharp woman, and she looks familiar somehow. Is she married to someone in the public eye? By now she was grinning. No, but her husband is. She's the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court. I hear she was a terror in her day as an attorney. When a lawyer gets to argue in front of her, they're both honored and scared. She has a reputation for being brutal. Wow, I thought she was just a nice lady. She's sweet. I felt a tug on my arm and turned. It was Vivian. She was a small woman, and she pulled me down, surprising everyone by kissing my cheek. Thank you, Tommy. I've been called a lot of things over my career, and that was one of the nicest. She looked over at Eve. Eve, my darling, I insist you and this nice young man join my husband and I for dinner in the near future. She turned and gave me a card. Here, just in case she forgets my number. Flashes had been going off randomly as photographers got shots for the papers and state magazines. Eve was floored. It was all she talked about on the way home. Dad is gonna have a fit. He's been trying to get some private time with her for ages. You must have made quite an impression. We were on the cover of the art and social sections of the Sunday papers across the state. The arts section identified me as a local critic, based on a flippant remark Vivian had made to a reporter about what a discerning eye I had. They had captured the kiss she had given me, and several shots of Eve and I in groups and separately. The society page had one of us together and several of us in groups of important people. They did identify me correctly as a local businessman and speculated on our relationship. Even my family found the whole thing vastly amusing. Eve told Celeste that if anybody asked, she would identify me as her boyfriend. It made me smile. We started spending a lot of time together. She was at my house 2 or 3 times a week, and we went out every weekend. I was falling in love and fighting it tooth and nail. Our worlds were just too different. It would never work. Still, I never tried to break it off. Celeste and Eve had become friends, to the point where when she wanted to take Amy on a date with us, she agreed. I was the last to know, as usual. It was my turn to pick where we were going, and the State Symphony was in town. I had told her, and she told me not to worry about tickets. Her family were patrons, and one of the perks was free tickets. Eve picked up Amy and Celeste up the day before, and they took Amy shopping for a dress. Celeste said later it made her uncomfortable at first. She had never entered many of the shops they went to. Amy loved being the center of attention. She flounced and twirled and wheedled, and ended up with 3 dresses instead of 1. Eve refused to let Celeste pay for anything, reminding her it was her treat. They lunched at a really nice tea room Eve frequented. Amy was odd. She hadn't told me who was going with us, just that it was someone dear to her. Celeste and Amy showed up giggling an hour before we were due to leave. Eve immediately rushed Amy into the guest room, leaving Celeste with me. Has she told you yet? She was smiling that smile again. Has who told me what? I replied, trying to get my tie straight. She came over and helped me. Eve, has she told you she loves you yet? I'm glad she was handling my tie. I would have strangled myself. No, and I think you got it wrong. Bullshit, she snorted, smoothing my tie. She's in love with you. You're in love with her. Don't try to argue. I see the way you look at her. She's perfect, beautiful, rich, and in love with you. It just doesn't get any better. She saw the look in my eye. That's just it. She's way out of my league. All I could ever offer her is me, and at best a lower middle-class lifestyle. She'd get bored pretty quick. No, even if I did love her, it's doomed from the start. Even Amy swept in at that moment. Eve looked stunning, the knee-length, standard little black dress and simple pearls. Amy was almost a miniature version. her simple little smock highlighted by a sash and a little gold locket. They both twirled for us while Celeste took photos. "How do we look, Uncle Tommy?" Aunt Eve said we'd be the two hottest girls at the concert. "Do you think so?" I scooped her up. "Your Aunt Eve is correct, as usual. Now, shall we go?" After kisses and hugs, Celeste went back home, telling me to bring her back after lunch tomorrow. She had a tear in her eye. "You guys look so perfect together. I can't wait to see how beautiful your children will be. Have a good night." With a final admonition to Amy to behave, she was off. Heads turned when we entered the hall. They should. I was with two beauties. Amy insisted on walking between us, holding both our hands. We didn't have to worry about Amy. I was afraid she would get bored and restless. She sat, enthralled by the music. We were front row center, and the maestro noticed her. During an intermission, knowing who she was, he came and chatted with Eve. Turning to Amy, he asked if she was enjoying the evening. "Very much, sir. It's great. Can I have your autograph?" This pleased him no end. After the intermission, he talked about the pieces they would be performing next and singled Amy out. The crew put a spotlight on us. "Ladies and gentlemen, here is the future of classical music. This is Miss Amy Yount and her parents. Amy, this next piece is dedicated to you." She got a round of applause and became a dedicated fan of classical music for the rest of her life. It got even better after the concert, when Eve took her backstage to meet the musicians. Most everyone signed a poster of the orchestra for her, and they gave her 2 CDs. She insisted we play them as we drove. She was asleep before we got home. I carried her into the guest room, and Eve got her into her pajamas. She roused enough to insist we both kiss her goodnight. Eve excused herself, and Amy, with the directness of youth, started asking questions. "Are you in love with Aunt Eve?" I tousled her hair. I did that a lot when she was around. "I'll tell you if you can keep a secret." "I am." She giggled. "I don't think it's a secret. Mom keeps telling me she'll be my real aunt pretty soon. That makes me very happy. Tell Aunt Eve I love her too." She was asleep again before I had the lights off. That was the first night we made love. When I came out of the guest room, I couldn't find Eve. Her car was still in the drive, so I knew she hadn't left. I called out, softly. Her answer came from my bedroom. "Shoo, you'll wake Amy. Come to bed, honey." She was standing by the bed, in a gown that was both sexy and demure. "Come on. I'm tired and don't want to drive home. I've slept with you before, remember? And I promised Amy we'd have breakfast together. I knew if we laid down together we would make love. I knew it would never last, and I could see heartbreak ahead. Which side do you want?" She snuggled up to me. What started out as a simple goodnight kiss became intense pretty quickly. I was glad, because we made slow, sensuous love instead of having hard, steamy sex. It was beautiful beyond words. We cuddled for a moment before she got up and used the bathroom to clean up a bit. She had her gown back on when she came out. "Put your bottoms on." "Why?" She looked at me, smiling. "Because more than likely a little girl is going to wake before us, and the first thing she's going to do is come in here. Now, get dressed." As we lay together, just before I went to sleep, she whispered in my ear, "So, this is what married with children sex is like." I could get used to this, although an occasional trip to grandparents would be a must. "I want 3, honey. Good night." I woke up feeling disappointed for some reason. Then I realized I was alone. I didn't like it. I wandered into the kitchen. There was a note on the table. "Good morning, sleepyhead. You missed breakfast. Your girls had some errands to run. Amy is staying again tonight, and we had to pick up a few things. Meet us at Mom's, 3 o'clock. Love you." I did some preventative maintenance on my equipment, cleaned the kitchen, mowed the lawn. Finally, I cleaned up and made the drive. They were in the pool. Amy, Eve, and even Greta had on matching bathing suits, a simple one-piece, all in yellow. They were obviously new. Amy clambered out of the pool and gave me a big hug, soaking me. Eve followed, soaking me even more. "You were going to end up wet anyway. Your suit is in the pool house, hurry up." So I changed, and we played in the pool until dinner time. Eve and I linked hands and threw Amy as far as we could, hearing her laughter until she hit the water. Amy insisted we do the same for Greta. I think it was the first time I ever heard her laugh. Amy was so worn out she had to have a nap before dinner. Eve put her in her old room. She came back with a surprise announcement. "Sorry, but you get to spend the night alone. Mom, Amy, and I are having a pajama party. She's sleeping here tonight. Celeste knows. Now, do you want dinner? Or would you rather go home and see how loud I can get?" We tried our best to pound each other into mush, and we pretty well succeeded. She was vocal, not ashamed to tell me what she wanted. We fell back, sweaty and exhausted. I have to go now, love. Amy and Mom are expecting me. I can think of nothing I want to do more than stay in your arms, but we have the rest of our life to do that. I'll see you tomorrow. Collect us about 1. I lay back as she showered and left. My house never felt so empty. So, we became an official couple. Eve spent more and more time with me and moved clothes until we had to put some in the spare bedroom. I woke up one day and realized she had been there 3 weeks without going home once. I asked her about it. She kissed me. I am home, silly. We lived together for another month or 2 before we had our first serious discussion about our future. Amy had become a surrogate daughter, spending about 1 weekend every 3 weeks. I watched them bond. One night after Amy was in bed and she was snuggled up to me on the couch, she turned to me. I want a baby. What? She stirred. I'm sorry, that came out wrong. I want to have your baby, our baby. We love each other. It's time for us to make future plans. This was the talk I was dreading. I love you too, more than I can say. But we're so different. You walk through doors I could never open. You have more money than I'll ever make. Sooner or later you would miss your old world. Then where would we be? In a bitter fight that I'd lose over my children. I don't think you'll be satisfied with me. I wasn't expecting her response. She slapped me so hard I fell off the couch. She rushed into our bedroom. She came out dressed in one of her mommy gowns and went into Amy's room. They were both gone when I got up. A little after noon, she came back. I came out to meet her. She slapped me again, just as hard. You shithead. I love you, and this is what you think? I'm just a shallow rich girl out for a lark? Damn you straight to hell. Tommy Yount. I'm going back to Mom's for a while. Think about what you want, and just so you know, if I had known you felt like this, I would have given every dime away to keep you. I never thought I'd say this to you, but you're an idiot. She jumped back into her car, and I didn't see her for 3 weeks. Talk about a backlash. I was an instant a-hole to my family, her family, and all our friends. Amy refused to speak to me. It isn't often a Supreme Court justice calls you to advise you on your love life. I know now how she earned her reputation. In simple legal terms, there is no law against being a dumbass, but I'm looking for a loophole, so I can sentence you to make it up to her. The poor girl came to me trying to get me to help her get rid of her wealth so she could be with you. I've always respected you, Tommy. You're honest, forthright, a fine young man. Don't make me think less of you because you won't listen to your heart. Go to her. She'll take you back in an instant. Please, Tommy. I thought about it for a few days. Then I did some shopping and made some plans. I called Greta and asked if I could come by. She wasn't happy. Are you sure you want to see her? You know my husband hates you, but even he isn't happy about the breakup. She's just now stopped crying. I warned you not to hurt her, but you didn't listen. You made her fall in love with you anyway. I was so proud of her and was getting used to the idea of grandchildren in the near future. I begged, I pleaded, and finally convinced her. She got Eve to answer the door when I came over. She wasn't expecting me, and she paled when she saw me on my knees. I'm here to beg you back into my life. I'll do anything. Please give me another chance. Every resource I'll ever have from this moment on will be used to make sure you have a happy life. Please, Eve, forgive me. Oh, and if you do, will you marry me? I held out the ring, not daring to look up. After a few seconds, I couldn't stand the suspense and did look up. She wasn't there. Well, I had given it my best. Greta caught me before I got to the truck. Vivian was right. You are a dumbass. Get in the house right this second. I have an hysterical daughter on my hands, and you're going to fix it. She tried to look stern, but a smile leaked out. When I entered, she was in the foyer and pounced on me so hard we both fell. She was trying to kiss me and talk at the same time. I love kiss, marry, kiss, ring, kiss now. I pulled it back out of my pocket. She slipped it on and looked at me. I'm making you a promise in front of my mom and God. This ring will never leave my finger while I live. Never. Her dad was furious. I forbid this. He's a low-class gold digger. All he wants is your money. You are not to marry him. Is that clear? If he expected her to roll over, he was badly mistaken. I wasn't there, but Greta told me about it later. It's not up to you. I'm of age and not dependent on you. You don't have to love him as long as I do. Be warned, if you try to coerce him in any way or try scaring him, I'll be gone whether I marry him or not. And if I go, so does your campaign money. I didn't know for a long time, but he always got a sizable donation and even a loan or two from her trust fund during election time. The money would be hard to make up if it was gone. She didn't actually gain control of the money until she was 25, but she did meet regularly with her financial advisors, and they were very sensitive to her wishes, partly to keep the money with them when she gained full control. Her grandfather had wisely kept her father away from any access to the trust. He wouldn't let it go, and tried everything he could to break us up. It was hard because all I ever did was go to work and come home to Eve. When he tried to set me up with a woman at a company picnic one of my employers held, it was the last straw. It was so obvious it was pathetic. No one knew who she was, no one knew who invited her, and when she started following me around I lost it. Eve couldn't come. She worked with several charities and was at a budget retreat. I got a friend who was filming his kids to get a few good shots of her. She was dressed sexily, but conservatively. She made it a point to be near me, brushing up against me slightly at every opportunity. I acted like I was interested and proposed we slip into a secluded gazebo for a conversation. She had her breasts out before we sat down. I hit the video app on my phone. I'm sure you've got somebody recording this, so you don't mind if I do it too, do you? I motioned to my friend, who had come out of the trees with his camera. A second opinion. She looked frightened. Now, shove your tits back into that excuse you have for a top and listen to me. You tell good old Stan this shit has officially stopped being funny. I'm not screwing around anymore. Ask him how it would look if the press found out he was using hookers to seduce me to block my marriage to his daughter. If he's willing to do that, what's he done in the past when he wanted something to happen? I don't have a lot, but I'll make it my business to try and find out. Take that message to him. She denied everything, of course, then blustered she would tell Eve I tried to seduce her if I didn't keep quiet. If you didn't know her dad, how did you know her name? If I were you, I'd quit while I was losing, go back to Stan and say it didn't work. By now, I showed Eve the video, including the tag number of the car she was driving. It was traced back to a rental company. The woman was traced back to an escort service. A few discreet phone calls later, we had the owner of the escort service she worked for. Apparently, she and Stan had a history. When I told Eve, she went ballistic. He was in the Capitol at work when he got the call. You miserable a-hole. Screw you. You are not invited to the wedding or the reception. Don't call. Don't come to see me. If you're very lucky, I'll send you a picture of your grandchildren every year or so. And you better start networking. Your campaign money well just dried up. Maybe I'll call the local papers and talk about what a loving father you are. Maybe play a little video for them. It shook him pretty bad. It took 3 weeks of apologizing to calm her down, and it increased his hatred of me. He insisted strongly on a prenup, and for once I agreed with him. Eve had a fit. We don't need this. We're going to be together forever. I know you wouldn't hurt me. I talked her into it. It's just a piece of paper, honey. We'll never use it, and it will make everyone more comfortable. More importantly to me, it'll send a strong message that I love you, not your money. Her dad had his lawyers draw it up and sent it to the lawyer I used for business. I liked him, and he had agreed to act for me. He called me when he got it. Have you read it? No, but just tell me what it says. He sighed. Well, it's 30 pages long. Basically, it says if you guys split up, she gets everything. All her money, your business, sole custody of any children you may have. And that's just the high points. What would you like me to do? I drove over and looked at it, made a copy and sent it back. I had written in thick black marker. No way in hell. I showed it to Eve, and she couldn't even speak for a few minutes. When she calmed down, she asked me if I seriously thought she had approved it. I laughed. Not a snowball's chance in hell. Eve said she would have another lawyer draw one up. Tensions, already high between her father and I, were threatening to boil over. I decided to put the whole thing to rest when I wrote my own prenup. It was less than 1 page. I had my lawyer couch it in legalese and presented it during lunch with her parents. Eve had already seen it. The gist went like this. If the marriage should fail for non-sexual reasons, each party will leave with what they brought into it, dividing anything accumulated together 50-50. If children are present, arbitration will be required to ensure custody will be fair to all. The parties must agree to the decree of the arbitrator without recourse to litigation. If the parties split due to infidelity, the offending party will immediately surrender all rights to any children, possessions, or wealth brought into the marriage, unless they choose the following alternative. The infidelity must be documented in a manner that is irrefutable. If the offending party will admit the infidelity and apologize in a public manner decreed by the offended party, the prior agreement will be in force. Greta thought it was cute. Stan went ballistic, but it was too late. It had already been signed and recorded. Without a doubt, it was the biggest wedding the town had ever seen. We had to hold it in the Citizen Center because we couldn't find a church big enough. 500 guests. About 40 were mine, mostly family. Eve was responsible for about 80. The rest were political cronies of her dad. Greta told me later it cost about $200,000. Celeste was a bridesmaid. Amy was flower girl. Vivian helped officiate the service. We went to Cancun for 3 weeks, came back tanned and tired. I thought she was going to kill me. We would do some activity like scuba diving or horseback riding, and she would look at her ring. Within 30 minutes, we were in our suite, in a secluded cove, the jungle, or any secluded room we could find, banging like bunnies. When the prenup came up, we had a long, serious talk about her money. I surprised her by acknowledging I would never have the money she did, and while I wasn't adverse to using the money once in a while for vacations, education, and lifestyle improvements, I didn't want to depend on it. What I didn't want and refused to do was give up my business. I still intended to work, being proud I had been able to open and operate a successful business at my age. I gave up my little 2-bedroom house, renting it to a cousin. Our wedding present from her parents was the money for a new one. Her dad had already picked it out, 3 doors down from their house. He was outraged when we refused. It was even bigger than his, 8 bedrooms, media room, so on. Eve liked it, but wasn't in love with it. The fact that her father hand-picked it wasn't lost on her. We found a nice little plot of land about 20 minutes away, and I let Eve pick out what she wanted. The land sloped a bit, and she worked with the builders constantly. For bedrooms upstairs, with a full basement, mostly brick and stone, with 2 fireplaces. She went over every detail with me to make sure I agreed. She took great pains over the basement. It would be the domain of our children, a combination playroom entertainment center. She had already planned the birthday and slumber parties. This led to a long discussion about children. "How many do you want?" she asked. "As many as we can love," was my answer. I must have got it right judging by her smile. "I don't think I can physically produce that many. How about starting at 3 and going from there?" She wanted to get pregnant right away, but I convinced her to wait. "Let's enjoy each other for a while first, honey. You and I both know when we have kids the focus will shift. It will be all about them. What we want will always come last. That's how it should be, and I don't have a problem with it. But, for a little while, I want to be selfish and keep you to myself." Again, I must have said the right thing, judging by the loving I got that night. Eve usually took the lead when we made love. I was no virgin, but she was far more experienced than I. We had a long talk about it, just after we got engaged. To her credit, she brought it up. "I need you to know everything. You saw me at my worst the first day you met me. I was a rebellious, spoiled little wild child. Mom was great, but she was never really forceful. You know what my dad is like. I did many things I'm now ashamed of. I don't really want to talk about it, but I will if you need to know. Suffice to say, I wasn't a very nice person. You know I had an STD, and I'm ashamed to say it wasn't the first. I don't know how I dodged AIDS or hepatitis. Luckily, I was afraid of drugs and used alcohol as my crutch. Falling off the balcony was my turning point. I was immobilized in that hospital bed, and I had plenty of time to think. Even if you hadn't rescued me, I like to think I would have changed anyway. Meeting you and your family opened my eyes to the way the real world worked, not my fantasy party lifestyle. I wanted that, then I realized I wanted you. Of all my party friends, I only keep in contact with about 5, all girlfriends from college. I could care less about the rest. It shames me to say it, but I've had sex with a lot of guys. But I've only had one lover, you. I promise you, I'll never go back to the way I was. What I want with you is far too valuable to ever risk." There was a lot of sniffling during her little speech, and I could tell it took a lot out of her to make it. I hugged her tightly. "Honey, the past is the past, and there's nothing we can do about it. I didn't know you then. I can only base my feelings for you on what you've done since we got together. I wake up every morning with you beside me and savor it, thinking how lucky I am. So no, I don't need to hear details. It wouldn't matter or change you from who you are now. That will always be enough for me." And it was, for 3 years. Her dad was filled with burning ambition. He had done 2 terms as Speaker of the House and had set his sights on the governorship. He and his committee had spent 3 years laying the foundation. The week before he announced, he had Eve and I over for dinner. He told us his plans, saying he needed the support of all his family. He was looking directly at me. Although I didn't like him personally, he was a good politician and had orchestrated several pieces of legislation that I liked, including one that actually benefited small businesses. "If you're directing that at me, Stanley, I have no problem supporting you." He beamed. Good. I need you to know you two will have to appear with me from time to time. The committee may even ask you to do a commercial or 2. Think you can handle that?" I felt Eve locked down on my hand. I shrugged. I hated the man. Thought he was a slimy son of a bitch, but I loved his daughter. "Sure, as long as it's not too time-consuming." He rushed to reassure me. 1 or 2 days at the most, I promise." She seemed on edge as we drove home. holding my hand like it was a lifeline. Something felt odd, but I couldn't place it. "Thank you, honey, for helping my dad. But promise me you won't let politics seduce you." I don't think I could stand it. I couldn't understand her intensity, but tried to reassure her. "No worries, babe. My volunteer work opened my eyes enough to realize I could never be a politician. You have to trade so much of yourself away, there's nothing left of you at the end of the day. Not a lifestyle I could enjoy." My career as a member of various committees began by accident. Eve served on a few to keep herself busy, but I usually kept away from that part of her life. I even resented it from time to time when it took time away from us. But they were all good causes that she believed in, so I kept my grumbling to a minimum. This one came looking for me, and I couldn't turn my back. My first cousin had a daughter that had contracted scarlet fever when she was young. Her temperature rose to 109, giving her a fever-induced heat stroke. It left her mentally challenged. Her mind never developed past that of an 8-year-old. She could do most mundane things, but she would never be able to support herself and lead a full life. Her parents were devoted to her. The state had a program that had been in operation for several years. It was a social center workplace for the adult handicapped. Anyone over school age that could function in a social setting could participate. Vans were supplied for transportation. Local companies would subcontract work, packing simple boxes, folding t-shirts. One paper tube manufacturer had them punch holes in the end of tubes. They each drew a check at the end of the month, usually just above or below $100. It gave them a sense of pride to be contributing to society and earning their own money. The federal grant was up, and the state refused to pick up the program, reneging on the promise of the previous administration. We had a month to come up with enough money to operate until funding could be secured. The fallout would be catastrophic for the families. Parents would have to quit jobs to provide care. Incomes would decrease, houses could be lost. I was asked to attend the organizational meeting because of my connection to politics via my father-in-law. They were sadly mistaken. I deliberately distanced myself, never having been interested in politics to begin with. It became pretty obvious there were no natural leaders in the group. Most were in a mild panic. Finally, my cousin asked me to say a few words. I took the podium. "Look, the first thing we have to do is calm down. Yes, it's a terrible problem, but panicking will get us nowhere. As I see it, the first thing we need to do is to come up with enough operating money to last another month. That will give us time to appeal to the ones in power and the public. You need a spokesperson, a planning committee, and some direction. Now, anybody got any ideas how to come up with operational money?" Various fundraisers were discussed and considered. Tentative plans were formed. The debate got a bit heated when over the chairmanship. Our group were composed of 2 small counties, tied together by districts. Both counties felt one of their own should be the leader. Why not have co-chairs, one from each county? That way each could handle their own, and meet once a week with the committee to review progress and entertain suggestions. This was quickly agreed on. The committee was formed, 3 people from each county. A local businessman was proposed, red lobbied, and accepted from the other county. Then I got blindsided. By unanimous decision, we have only one choice for us. Tommy yawned. There was a lot of applause. I hesitated briefly, but accepted. The other chair made a speech, making promises without thoughts of how to make them come true. I took a totally different approach. This is going to be hard. The politicians have made their minds up, and they're going to be difficult to sway. Our work is going to be cut out for us. One thing I do know, each of his has some kind of talent that will help us, and knows someone else who can do the same. We need to find and exploit those talents. We need researchers to look for loopholes in the old grants or the possibility of new ones. We need to work the politicians on the local level for some stopgap money. We have to prepare to work on the state and federal levels. If we can't get them to commit, we need to find out why and make that available to the media. One thing a politician hates more than anything is adverse publicity. Our first appeal was to our county commissioners. We figured out what it cost to run the program for a month and asked for a one-time grant of $3,500. I had talked to one of the local radio personalities to see if he could help with a fundraiser. He not only agreed to help, but put me in touch with their news department. We made sure we were on the agenda and showed up in force. Parents, siblings, friends, and of course all the adult challenged showed up, overflowing the meeting room. I had met with the county commissioners 2 days before to give them information, facts, and figures that would warrant keeping the program going. They assured me we would probably get the money. When the time came, I made the request, stating our position as concisely as possible, citing facts and figures that showed that discontinuing the program would actually cost the government 5 times the amount in other costs. What surprised me was the amount of media attention it generated. My radio friends were there, but there was also journalists from 2 local papers, and a TV news crew that had been tipped off by my DJ friend. We made the 11 o'clock news and the morning programs. The response numbers were huge, guaranteeing follow-up interviews and other news crews. We all got a surprise when the senior commissioner responded to our plea. "We appreciate you bringing this to our attention. All residents of this county deserve respect. This is a worthy program that should have never faced termination. Our state government did a woeful job in not giving the parents and caretakers warning or time to prepare. That being said, we intend to give you all the help we can. Unfortunately, we can't honor your request for $3,500. Sorry." There was a collective gasp in the room. The commissioner, all of them actually, were grinning. "We feel the amount is too low. Instead, we feel $5,000 is an acceptable amount. Use the money wisely. Hopefully our neighboring county will feel as generous." The room echoed with the applause, while I stood there in the glare of the TV lights. We made sure at the end of the meeting, every one of our group shook the hand of every commissioner and thanked them. One of the challenged, a woman in her middle age with a mongoloid face, cried and hugged everyone, thanking them in her halting speech. The media ate it up. The project took on a life of its own. People we didn't know were calling, offering monetary support and volunteering time. I gave an exclusive interview with the radio station to thank them, going over the progress we were making and talking about the help we were getting. It turned into a 3-day-a-week update. My first brush with politics was a walk in the park. When we got to the other county commission, it was a whole different ball game.